I'm Jason Scott. I'm a farmer here at Walnut Hill Farms in Hurlock, Maryland. I farm, it's a fully owned family farm, farm with my mother and father, and then we also have a cousin that helps us out and a few employees as well, especially during the busy season. We grow mostly corn, soybeans, wheat, and barley. We also grow some vegetables. We do grow sweet corn for processing currently, and we also have a seed business for Pioneer. We sell in 3 different counties for Pioneer and sell corn, soybeans, and wheat for them. Our farm is about 1,500 acres, but we also do some custom harvesting and spraying for another cousin that also farms in the area. I've been on the Grain Producers Board basically since I graduated from college back in 2003. And then in 2008, I became representative of Maryland on the U.S. Wheat Associates Board, which is the wheat export board representing U.S. wheat producers all over the world. And then in 2016, 2017, I was chairman of U.S. Wheat. But I've remained on Grain Producers the whole time and now represent them, or still represent them on the wheat board as well. So now I'd like to invite you out to the farm. We're going to go see a little bit of corn harvest for this fall. So this is a yield monitor. So this is essentially giving me at all times a map of the yields as we go along the field, actually in real time drawing that map. This over here is dark green because that's what we finished yesterday. So it's not giving me the yields on that, but anything we're picking today, dark green would be a higher yield, down to red would be lower, and we'll be getting into some like yellow and red here as we get out of the irrigated part of this field. So it's giving me that. It's giving me the moisture content of the corn here. So this is 20.9 or 20.98, almost 21. And then it also gives me the wet weight of what we've harvested. I've got it set on load. So on this current load, I can go to a different page here that will actually give me information about this whole field that we've harvested. So we're about, let's see, we're 54 acres into a field that's about 65, 66 acres. So we've got 14 acres remaining. It tells you how long you've worked on the field. And actually this field is interesting because we did a strip trial here with a new product where we planted 24 rows with the product, 24 rows without, all the way across the whole field. So at the end of the harvest of this field, I will take off the end rows and any dry land, and then I can get a good comparison of whether that product actually worked for us or not. So it's pretty interesting and valuable information to have, not to mention the auto steer and the other combine control that you can have in the technology as well. Basically, our corn here from the field pretty much all goes directly into the chicken industry. Here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, we have a very large chicken industry, and I guess Delaware as well. And on our farm, we do have storage. We can store roughly 1/3 of our corn crop. The other 2/3 would go directly into a feed mill. We have a feed mill right in the town here, Hurlock, that we're nearby. And so that corn basically, I think you saw some footage of me dumping on the grain cart. I will dump on the grain cart, which saves us a little bit. It's a little bit more economical because the combine doesn't have to stop. So we dump on the grain cart. We've got all kinds of little hand signals and phone calls and everything back and forth for where I need him and when. And then he goes and dumps on the truck. We run tractor trailers. And then that corn is going, in this case, is going directly to a feed mill. So this particular variety here is a refuge in the bag Acre Max with Leptra. So that's a lot of jargon basically to say that instead of having to plant a separate variety for a refuge, the refuge corn, which is something that the EPA requires, is mixed right in the bag with this. So that just takes one step off of our plate. The things that this corn protects us from primarily are corn borers, which we don't always have a problem with corn borers, but prior to BT corn, it seemed like we had at least one problem field every year. And what corn borers can do is they will actually bore into the shank of the ear, and they can make your ears drop before you get a chance to harvest them. they can also bore into the stalk of the corn and cause standability issues. And you may see some standability issues in this field here, which are not at all related to corn borer. We had a hurricane the first week of August this year with some 60 and 70 mile an hour winds, and this corn was a little bit damaged. We're still able to get most of it. The yield is, I would say the yield is hurting a little bit by that, but unfortunately, we definitely lost a few bushels off the top end in the really good spots from that hurricane. But back to the BT. This corn is also protected from black cutworm, so that takes a pesticide out of our mix that we would typically spray in the spring. We would spray a pesticide right when planting, right after planting corn before it comes up. That will take care of black cutworms, so that we don't have to worry about them. They will actually cut the plant off at the ground early on in the growing season. And then this one also has a product called Leptra in it that takes care of corn earworm. So here in Maryland, since we're in such an environmentally sensitive area, we have a pretty robust cover crop program through the state. And a cover crop is something that we plant in the fall or late summer, early fall, after a corn crop or after a soybean crop, that helps to stop erosion as well as take up any nutrients that are left over from the commodity crop from the year before. We actually flew on a cover crop. We had an airplane come out, spread. It's a mix of half wheat and 1/4 radish and 1/4 Austrian winter peas. Oh yeah, absolutely. So looking back to roughly 25 years ago, we were putting a pesticide on almost every acre, an insecticide on almost every acre early on in the season to protect against black cutworms. Outside of that, a lot of years we would have a corn borer issue at some point that you might have to spray for, and then there would definitely be more corn earworm sprays in the fall. Not something that we have to do every year, but definitely something that that we have done. I would say it's actually even more important in sweet corn. We actually grow non-GMO sweet corn, but they do have to spray that about every 3 days once the corn starts to silk and starts to form an ear, just to keep earworms out of that sweet corn. If that was a BT product, they wouldn't have to spray it. They would still probably spray it as more of a protection, but they wouldn't have to spray it anywhere near as often or with chemicals that are anywhere near as harsh as the ones they have to use today. So we have a pretty robust and integrated pest management program here on the farm. We have a hired crop scout who is another set of eyes actually looking at every field every week. And he actually has multiple employees, so it's even beyond that. He doesn't send the same scout to the same field every week. So that way I'm looking at it, I have an employee that's checking fields occasionally, and then our scout is looking at it. So that's 3 sets of eyes. I don't get there every week, but the scout definitely does. And honestly, we don't use a pesticide unless we have to. So we farm in Hurlock, Maryland on the Eastern Shore, and it's very sandy soil here. Though we do get a fair amount of rain, we average about 40 inches of rain a year. Our soils don't hold on to a lot of water. So we have center pivot irrigations. We have, I guess it's 13 or 14 pivots now. And that covers about half of our acres on our operation. That allows us to mainly take out one of the biggest risks in agriculture, which is the weather. It doesn't completely eliminate it, because you can always have too much rain, or you can have, like I said, in this field, you can have a hurricane come through and hurt your crop a little bit. But it takes out the issue of lack of water and drought, which most years we do experience at least a few weeks in this area where we're pretty much running irrigations nonstop. This year it was the month of July. We had very little rain in the month of July, and it was a very busy month for us with keeping up with irrigating both corn and soybeans at that point. And we also have sweet corn, so we were irrigating the sweet corn as well. So in Maryland, ever since the late 90s, we've had nutrient management in the state.
Every farmer in the state has to have a plan. They're required to have a plan. That plan has to be basically by field and then updated at a minimum of every 3 years. Most people update them every year. I update mine every year. So the main things that go into that are your field maps and how everything is laid out on your farm. Soil tests, which we soil test every acre every year. And then about half of the farm, we actually do grid sampling every year. So we'll do that on like a 3-year rotation where we'll grid sample for 3 years and then go back to just one sample per field. The grid samples are on 5-acre blocks. So say we have a 100-acre field, we take 25-acre samples in that field, and then we can lay that out on a map and actually get a map of how the nutrients come in, or how the nutrients are in that field. So that would just be where the samples are taken for that particular farm. And then that creates a map like that will give you your pH, your phosphorus, and your potassium on a grid for that whole farm. And then you can then spread your fertilizer based on that, or spread your lime based on that for the pH. And we do that, you know, it's pretty expensive to do, so we don't do it on every field every year, but we do like to do that just to kind of double check things and even up the fields. Anyway, back to nutrient management. You take your soil tests, you take your yield goal for each field, and then that all goes into this computer system. And then basically you get a recommendation out of the computer system for exactly what fertilizer you need to apply. It even goes down to, this one tells you, you know, at green up, this one's for wheat. At green up, you should put down half of your nitrogen. And then again, a few weeks later, when the wheat's a little bit larger, and split that nitrogen so you're not putting it on all at one time and putting it all at more risk of running off or volatilizing into the environment. So this is something we have to do every year. And then at the end of the year, we take, on a whole farm basis for each crop, we report back to the state how much nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium we used on that whole crop. And that gets reported in by March 1st of the following year. So something that we've learned to deal with. It's not something that we liked up front. It was just a lot more red tape and work and things to keep us busy during the winter. But we've definitely learned to live with it and how to utilize it to maybe do a little bit better job managing fertilizer and in our operation.
Hi, so I'm Chad Nagel. I'm with Nagel Farm Service. We are on the eastern shore of Maryland, approximately 15 or 20 miles east of the Chesapeake Bay. And our company, Nagel Farm Service, we are involved in buying grain from local farmers. Our company has been around since 1946. My brother Chip and I, we're actually third generation, so our grandfather Brooks Nagel started the company, and we continue to work today with our parents, David and Jan Nagel, along with about 40 employees. We have 5 locations here in 3 counties, all located within about 30 miles of each other. So we have storage facilities where we receive the grain, pay the farmer, and then we store it for a period of time until we make sales to the end user. Here domestically, our primary end user for corn is the poultry industry, which is well established here in our area, and we sell corn and soybeans to them for use in making chicken feed. So as the harvest arrives and we engage in buying from the farmer, they will arrive at our facilities usually about this time of the year, September, October, and they're bringing corn in directly from the field. We receive the grain. It comes onto a scale where we weigh the truck that comes in, and we also take a sample out of the back so we can test it for the moisture content and also the test weight. Any moisture above 15.5% will get a deduction in the price, and then we treat that grain accordingly, and we'll run it through a commercial grain dryer so that it'll enable us to store it long term. So we'll do that within 12 to 24 hours of the grain arriving at our location. We will dry it and have it stored in long-term storage. So after the trucks have been weighed and we've captured all of their information, we then move them over to the receiving pit where the truck is unloaded, and we generally take it into small holding tanks where we can then run it through the grain dryer, and then ultimately it goes into long-term storage. That process doesn't take very long for the farmer. We like to get them in and out in 5 to 10 minutes. The truck will then return to another scale where it will weigh out empty and give them the actual total bushels that they had on that load, along with the price, and we apply it to whatever contract they have with us. So once that's happened, the truck has made a full cycle here at our facility. They'll go back to the field where they are harvesting and return. Quite often they'll make 8 or 10 trips per day for a single farmer, and that activity carries on throughout the day. So we are also engaged at that time in loading out trucks. So as grain is coming in, when it's a plentiful harvest, we'll be making space to ensure that we can receive all of the bushels that our local farmers have. So at the same time, we have company-owned trucks who will be loading out corn and shipping immediately to the end user within a course of a few days after receiving it. So some of it has a very short shelf life where we hold it here. Some of it will stay for a longer period of time. So in a year like this year, where we have an abundant harvest with really good yields, we will actually run out of long-term steel storage, and we won't be able to ship it out fast enough to create space. In that case, we will start to pile corn on the ground. At this particular facility, we have room to pile about 1 million bushels of corn on the ground, in addition to about 2.5 million bushels worth of steel space. So that's kind of a short-term solution for a problem when the pace of harvest is faster than what we can keep up with. And additionally, we also are situated in a good location here geographically, as we're about 60 miles from the Port of Baltimore. So one good option for us is to load grain on shipping containers that we will then transport to the Port of Baltimore, and that can go from there to a number of destinations overseas, generally to Europe or Asia. And so the process of loading the shipping containers is one where we bring in a certified United States Department of Agriculture inspector. They verify the weights and also the quality grade factors real time as we're loading, and they certify that for the buyer's comfort as we're shipping overseas to them. So the inbound grain that we receive, it's very important that we understand the quality of it, as it's important to the end user and the ultimate buyer. And it also is a relevant factor for the storability of it and how long we can keep it in our bin. So we check for the moisture content. We also look for foreign matter, as well as damage and any hot or sour smelling kernels that would create a problem for either ourselves or the buyer. It's also important that when we receive it from the farmer, we generally are able to ship it without handling it too many times, which is often found to be an advantage to buyers. Fortunately, in the location where we exist, we're the first stop from the farmer, and then we are also generally the last stop in terms of shipping it when we put it on the container and send it to the port. So it's been handled much less, and we find that the grain quality is much higher with a limited amount of foreign material and broken kernels. We've also found that sorghum, also known as milo, has been of increasing interest to local farmers, and we see a number of acres that had formerly been planted in corn now going to sorghum. And so we've increased our handle of sorghum in recent years, very similar to corn as far as what we look at in terms of quality and moisture content, and we've found that there's interesting markets for that overseas as well.